In this lesson, we are going to learn how to multiply and divide rational expressions. We're going to work on section 9.2 out of your textbook on pages 710 and 711. And we're going to work problem numbers 2 through 24 even. So we already learned how to simplify rational expressions in the last video, and now we're going to learn how we multiply and divide them. So on number 2, we have negative y to the third divided by 10 times 15y divided by y to the sixth. So the very first thing that I want you to realize is that in your homework, your tests, all of that, you're going to have an answer space, just like that. And you have a negative fraction times a positive fraction. So a negative times a positive is a negative, so that means our answer is going to be negative. So it's really good to go ahead and practice doing that by putting the negative or positive in your answer so you know you're not going to forget it. So the negative's taken care of. I don't have to worry about that at all. So now I can go ahead and simplify before I multiply. So we always learned that you can multiply first and then simplify, or simplify first and then multiply. But remember, you always multiply straight across. So I recommend simplifying this 15 and 10 first. So the number that goes into both of these is 5. So 5 goes into 15 3 times. 5 goes into 10 2 times. So I only recommend simplifying the coefficients, which is the number in front of the variable. I only recommend simplifying those before you multiply. Try not to simplify the variables because it's just going to get a little confusing. So I'm going to write my negative just because it's habit, but we don't have to worry about it because it's already in our answer. And then I've got 3 in red here. And then y to the third times y to the first is y to the fourth. Remember, when you multiply your bases, you add your exponents. And then I have 2 in red here, y to the sixth. So 3 over 2, we've already simplified that as far as it can go, but my y to the 4 and y to the sixth can simplify further. So when you divide your bases, you subtract those exponents. So 6 minus 4 is 2, and my y squared is going to go to the bottom because 6 was bigger than 4. So you should have negative 3 divided by 2y squared. And it doesn't matter whether your negative is in the numerator, denominator, just in the middle. It all means the same thing. Okay, so looking at problem number 4, I have p to the fifth divided by 8 divided by negative p squared divided by 12p. It's a lot of divided bys. So again, very first thing that we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, I've got a positive number divided by a negative number. So when I divide those, I'm going to get a result of a negative. A positive divided by a negative is a negative. So I put that in my answer space. And now with division, your rule is to keep this first fraction the same. You change your division to multiplication, and then you flip that second fraction. So we're going to have 12p over negative p squared. You cannot simplify until you change your problem to multiplication. So I couldn't have simplified anything in here yet because it was still division. So make sure you don't break that rule. So my 8 and 12 can simplify to be 2 and a 3. I divided them both by 4. And now I'm going to go ahead and multiply straight across. So I get 3p to the sixth, and I get that because we have a 5 here and a 1 here. So 5 plus 1 is 6. And then negative 2p squared. So now My 3 over negative 2, that doesn't simplify at all, but my p's do. So I get 3p to the 4th over negative 2. So that p to the 4th is there because 6 minus 2 is 4, and 6 was the larger number. So my answer is negative 3p to the 4th over 2. Number 6, I have 3x to the 3rd y divided by 10xy to the 3rd times 5xy squared divided by negative 9xy to the 3rd. So again, for number 6, they gave us a positive fraction times a negative fraction. So my answer is negative. I'm going to go ahead and put that in my answer space. And now I'm going to simplify these coefficients only. Those are the numbers in front of the variables. So remember, you can multiply, or you can simplify up and down. You can simplify diagonally. What you cannot do is simplify side to side. You cannot simplify side to side. So make sure you remember those rules. But my 3 and 9, they're going to simplify to be a 1 and 3. And my 5 and 10 are going to simplify to be a 1 and 2. The reason I write in the red color when I'm simplifying is because it's going to make it a little bit easier for me to see what I have left after crossing out. So if that helps you, then great. If not, then you don't have to do that on yours. So 1 times 1 is 1. X to the 3rd times x to the 1st is x to the 4th. Y to the 1st times y squared is y to the 3rd. Then 2 times 3 is 6. X to the 1st times x to the 1st is x squared. Y to the 3rd times y to the 3rd is y to the 6th. Remember, you're adding those exponents because you're multiplying their bases. Okay, so now I have, I'm going to put that negative in there just so y'all don't get confused. So my 1 and 6 aren't going to change. They don't simplify any. However, x squared, or x to the 4th divided by x squared, it's going to give me an x squared on top. Y to the 3rd divided by y to the 6th is y to the 3rd. So my final answer is negative x squared divided by 6y to the 3rd. Number 8, I have 5x to the 3rd y to the 3rd over 8x to the 5th divided by 15x to the 3rd y divided by 32x to the 3rd y squared. So this is a division problem. We're dividing a positive by a positive, so that means my answer is going to be positive. So like the first 3 problems, my answers were all negative. We didn't want to forget that. So on this one, we don't have to worry about that negative. So we can just do the problem as normal. This is division, so our rule for division is keep, change, flip. So I'm going to keep this 5x to the 3rd y to the 3rd the same, and my 8x to the 5th the same. Change your division to multiplication, and then I have 32x to the 3rd y squared divided by 15x to the 3rd y. I got that by flipping that fraction above. Okay, so now I'm going to simplify my coefficients. My 8 and 32 simplify to be a 1 and 4. My 5 and 15 simplify to be a 1 and 3. So when I multiply these together, 1 times 4 is 4. X to the third times x to the third is x to the sixth. Y to the third times y squared is y to the fifth. And remember, we get that because when we multiply the bases, we add the exponents. Then I have 1 times 3 is 3, x to the 8th, and then y. Okay? So now my 4 and 3, they don't simplify at all, so we leave those. X to the 6th divided by x to the 8th gives you an x squared on bottom. Y to the 5th divided by y to the 1st is y to the 4th on top because 5 was bigger. Okay. Now let's look at problem number 10. On number 10, we have, oh, this is a long one, 4cd squared divided by 5cd times 3c to the third d divided by 2c squared d divided by 9cd divided by 20cd to the third. So this is what I recommend. I recommend working as if this was your only problem. So act as if you can't even see that second fraction, or that third fraction right here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to multiply everything. These are small enough numbers where I'm not going to simplify first. So 4 times 3 is 12. C to the first times c to the third is c to the fourth. D squared times d to the first is d to the third. Divided by 5 times 2 is 10. C to the third d squared, because all of these are understood exponents of 1. Now I'm going to bring in the division of 9cd divided by 20cd to the third. So remember, your rule is keep, change, flip. We get 12c to the 4 d to the third divided by 10 c to the third d squared, and we do times, and then we flip it. So we get 20 cd to the third divided by 9cd. So now I can go ahead and simplify these coefficients if I want to. And again, I could have up here with that 4 and that 2, but the numbers were just small enough where I didn't need to do that extra stuff right then. So my 12 and 9 are going to simplify by dividing by 3. I'm going to get a 4 and a 3. My 10 and 20 are going to simplify to be a 1 and a 2. So now, oops, I have 4 times 2 is 8, c to the 5, d to the 6th, because I added these exponents here, divided by 1 times 3 is 3, c to the 4, d to the 3. Okay? So now I go ahead and simplify. So 8 over 3 is going to stay. C to the 5 divided by c to the 4 is c. And you can put c or c to the 1. It doesn't matter. It's the same exact thing. And then d to the 6 divided by d to the 3 is d to the 3 on top. So you should get 8 cd to the 3 divided by 3. Okay, so now let's look at problem number 12. So at this point, I actually feel like the problems get easier because they're not so tedious. So remember what we talked about in the last video on simplifying, where we said whenever we have more than one term, like if we see addition or subtraction signs like here, that's an indicator that we're going to need to factor. So I'm going to go ahead and do the factoring that I can. So I'm going to take an a out, which leaves me with a minus 3. And I'm going to keep my denominator of 5a the same. That can't factor. And then 20a squared stays the same. And then 3a minus 9. A 3 factors out of there to leave me with a minus 3. So I'm going to go ahead and simplify everything that I can. My a minus 3's, they can cancel. My 5 and my 20 can cancel to be a 1 and a 4. Okay? So the reason the a minus 3's, just remember, whenever you divide something by its exact self, they cancel out. So I'm left with 4, a to the third, because I have an a to the first here and an a squared here. So that gives me an a to the third. And then 1 times 3 is 3. And then I just have an a to the first. So we know we're not finished because we have more than one a. So I simplify that by subtracting their exponents. So that gives me 4a squared divided by 3. And that is my final answer for number 12. Moving on to number 14. 7m squared plus 28m divided by 4m divided by 5m plus 20 divided by 12m squared. My recommendation on these types of problems is to go ahead and change your problem from division to multiplication first, then start factoring and simplifying. You could go ahead and factor here first, but it leaves a little more room for error. So I recommend first changing it to multiplication, then factoring. So I'm going to keep, change, flip. So keep that 7m squared plus 28m divided by 4m the same. Change that division to multiplication. And I'm going to flip that second fraction. So I can factor. I see that addition sign. So in this numerator, I can factor out a 7m, which leaves me with an m plus 4. Leave the 4m the same and the 12m squared the same. And then in this denominator, I can factor out a 5 to give me an m plus 4. So my m plus 4's here are going to cancel. And this 4 and 12 are going to simplify to be a 1 and a 3. So now I have 7 times 3 is 21, and I get an m to the third. Because this is an m to the first, this is an m squared, so that gives me a 3 over 5m. Don't forget that m there, that's why we're using these different colors. And if you find that you need to, when you're crossing these out, if you find that you need to almost completely black it out, or in this case red it out, so you can really see what you have left, then that's fine. There's no problem with that. So now I can still simplify these m's. So I'm going to get 21m squared, because you subtract those exponents, divided by 5. Okay, so now we're going to move on to problem number 16. On number 16, we have y squared minus 8y divided by 4y times 12y squared divided by y squared minus 64. So this is already multiplication, so I'm going to go ahead and factor what I can. So I can take a y out of my numerator. Oops. That's a minus 8, sorry guys. Divided by 4y. And I'm going to leave my 12y squared the same. And then this factors to be y plus 8, y minus 8. That's your difference of squares. So My y minus 8s are going to cancel. And that 4 and that 12 are going to give you a 1 and a 3. Feels very similar to the last problem. So I'm left with 3y to the third divided by y plus 8, and then there's a y in front. Now these y's here are going to simplify to give you 3y squared divided by y plus 8. Remember, the rule is if you're multiplying them together, then you can simplify, okay? So like, let's say this was a 6 instead of an 8. You could not simplify that 3 and that 6 because that 6 is being added to the y. So only when it's multiplication can you do it. So you're left with, on number 16, your answer being 3y squared divided by y plus 8. Okay, so problem number 18. On problem number 18, we have m squared minus 64 divided by 6m squared divided by 2m minus 16 divided by 24m to the fifth. So it's division, so I'm going to change flip. It's going to give me m squared minus 64 divided by 6m squared times 24m to the fifth divided by 2m minus 16. So I've got multiple terms here, so I'm going to factor what I can. So I get m plus 8, m minus 8 for here. My 6m squared stays the same. My 24m to the fifth stays the same. And I can factor a 2 out of this denominator to give me m minus 8. So my m minus 8's cancel. And then my 6 and 24 gives me a 1 and 4. But notice I can still simplify something. I can do it now or later. Since I can do it later, I'm going to show you what happens if we weren't to do it just yet. So I'm left with 4m to the fifth times m plus 8 divided by 2m squared. Well, that 4 and 2 that's going to simplify to be a 2. That m to the fifth divided by m squared is an m to the third, so there's nothing in that denominator now, and then we're left with m plus 8. We do not want to leave it over 1. If you're ever left with just a 1 in that denominator, then just don't even bother writing it. Problem number 20. Y squared plus 7y plus 10 divided by y squared plus 5y times 2y divided by y squared minus 4. So I'm going to go ahead and factor these since it's already in multiplication. So I can factor this by using my AC method, which is y plus 2, y plus 5. I can factor a greatest common factor out of here of y, which leaves me with y plus 5. My 2y just stays the same, and then I factor to get y plus 2, y minus 2. So my y plus 2's are going to cancel. And then my y plus 5's are going to cancel. So we're left with 2y divided by y times y minus 2. So I can simplify these two y's here and just cancel them out. I can do that because they're both being multiplied by something. I could not have simplified the top y with this y here because it's being subtracted by 2. Okay? So my final answer here is going to be 2 divided by y minus 2. For number 22, we have b squared plus 2b minus 8 over b squared minus 2b divided by b squared minus 16 over 4b. So the first thing I'm going to do is change this to multiplication. Okay, so I went ahead and did my keep, change, flip. Now I'm going to factor. So I'm going to factor with my AC method to get b plus 4, b minus 2. I'm going to factor out a greatest common factor to get b times b minus 2. 4b stays at the top. And we have b plus 4, b minus 4. So if you're not getting these, you need to do a review of factoring. So my b plus 4 and my b plus 4 are going to cancel. My b minus 2 and my b minus 2 are going to cancel, leaving me with 4b divided by b times b minus 4. Well, we already know that these two b's are going to cancel. I want to point out you cannot cancel these two 4's because that 4 is being subtracted from that b. Okay, so only if it's being multiplied by something can you simplify it. So you're left with 4 divided by b minus 4. And that's your final answer. Okay, so now let's look at problem number 24. This is the last problem in this section that we're going to actually go over. So I have 4p squared minus 1 divided by 2p squared minus 9p minus 5 times 3p squared minus 13p minus 10 divided by 9p squared minus 4. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and draw that because I need to factor each one of these numerators and denominators. My numerator of my first fraction is very easy to factor. It's a difference of squares. So it's 2p plus 1, 2p minus 1. And then my denominator over here is pretty easy. It's 3p plus 2, 3p minus 2. So now I need to factor 2p squared minus 9p minus 5. I'm going to do my AC method. If you need a review of this, feel free to pull up my video. So looking at this, I can easily see that negative 10 and positive 1 are my factors. And before I write this out factored, I need to simplify. So over here I get p minus 5 and 2p plus 1. Then I need to factor my 3p squared minus 13p minus 10. Oops. Alright, so I need to find out what multiplies to give me negative 30 and adds to give me negative 13. So it looks like it'll be a negative 10 and a oh, nope, that's not right. How about a negative 15 and a positive 2? That'll work. Negative 15 and positive 2 are going to work. So I need to simplify what I can. And I'm left with a p minus 5 and a 3p plus 2. So let's see what's going to be able to cancel. Well, my p minus 5 here, my p minus 5 here. I've got a 2p plus 1 and a 2p plus 1. And then I have a 3p plus 2 and a 3p plus 2. So that's going to leave me with 2p minus 1 divided by 3p minus 2. That concludes your lesson on multiplying and dividing rational expressions. I hope this video has helped you, and I wish you the best of luck.